All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's Ohio University webinar regarding our Shale Policy and Technology Symposium research. I'd like to hand it over to Scott Miller, who will provide a brief welcome and get the webinar rolling. Scott?
Thank you, Alyssa, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Miller, and I'm the Associate Dean for Industry Partnerships at the Russ College of Engineering and Technology here at Ohio University. On behalf of my colleagues on this webinar, I'd like to welcome you to the latest installment of our continuing series of webinars focused on Ohio's evolving energy landscape. Today's webinar, which is entitled the Ohio Shale Policy and Technology Symposium Recap, is made possible through a grant from Ohio University's Research Office and their innovation strategy. The innovation strategy aims to leverage Ohio University's standing as a major research institution and focus its considerable expertise in interdisciplinary research, teaching, and creative activity around major issues facing America in the 21st century. This project that has been funded through the innovation strategy is entitled Preventing the Bust: Innovations for Sustainable and Enhanced Economic Outcomes from Shale. It's a 3-year research program comprised of experts from the Russ College of Engineering, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs here at Ohio University, and collaborators outside the university. As many of you know, in Appalachia, Ohio, resource extraction booms are often followed by economic and environmental busts. While each bust is unique, they are generally characterized by two main components: an over-reliance on an extraction-related industry and a short-sighted failure to capture the more long-term value locally. The goal of this project is to develop a deeper understanding of how resource extractive industries can be better managed at a regional level to build a more robust and resilient economy that can withstand the sudden shocks often associated with such industries. Today's webinar is an opportunity for our research team to share with you the findings that they presented at a research symposium that was held here on the campus of Ohio University on April 18th and 19th and 20th. The panelists will discuss the results of a community survey, a workforce development white paper, and an economic impact analysis that they've conducted. We're also pleased to be joined today by Mr. Dana Saucier, Managing Director of the Shale Energy and Petrochemical Division at JobsOhio, who will share the current status of Ohio's shale development efforts in the mid and downstream sectors. If you enjoy this webinar, I invite you to watch for other webinars in coming months. As always, all of our events and project work, as well as downloadable versions of today's presenters' slide decks, can be found on our website at www.ohio.edu/CE3. I have just a couple of points I'd like to make before I hand the meeting over to our experts. First, I would like to extend my personal thanks to our strong panel of speakers. I feel confident that you are going to take something useful away from this meeting. Second, if you have a question that you would like to submit for our panelists during the session today, we ask that you use the question field on the GoToWebinar navigation pane on the right-hand side of your screen to type in a question for our panelists. We will try to get to as many questions as possible during our time together today. And finally, after our webinar, a brief online evaluation will be emailed to you. Please take a few minutes to provide us with feedback of today's session so that we can improve future sessions. We do read those, and we take that into consideration every time we hold these webinars. So with that, I believe I've covered all of my logistical bases. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, Mike Zimmer. Mike has been an executive in residence at the Voinovich School and the Russ College of Engineering since 2007, and currently works with Ohio University on energy and water development issues, on energy efficiency, technology, and finance, and on project management and public-private partnership development issues in the Appalachia region. Mike has led the American Bar Association's Renewables and Distributed Energy Committee from 2008 to 2010, and he led the ABA's Energy and Environmental Markets and Finance Committee from 2010 to 2012. Mike is a national expert on energy policy, on corporate sustainability, on clean tech transactions and finance. He served as Vice President and Assistant General Counsel of the American Gas Association to the National Energy Plan in the late 70s, and has worked on efforts to establish the cogen and renewable energy industry sectors nationwide under PURPA. He participated in the strategic planning that led to the formation of the American Council on Renewable Energy, ACORE, and contributed to national efforts to integrate renewables and increase energy efficiency with microgrids and energy storage, and he serves on numerous boards. Mike's recent work on assignments focus on energy and environmental issues in Canada, Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, California, New York, Connecticut, the District of Columbia, and Maryland for the manufacturing, buildings, and utilities and commercial sectors. Mike retired from Thompson Hine LLP and private law practice at the end of 2013. He received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Baltimore School of Law. And so with that, I think you'll agree that we have an expert in leading this discussion. And so I'm going to step out of the way and turn this webinar over to Mike and to our panelists. Mike, please take it away.
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon to our distinguished panelists as well as to our colleagues in attendance today. We're here today by way of background, focusing on the evolution of gas and oil production in our region with the advent of technology breakthroughs in shale development. Gas production since 1967 was effectively flat until approximately 2009, when we went through an experience with that technology improvement that increased natural gas production 20-fold since 2009. Locally, what we are doing in terms of natural gas development in Ohio, as well as in the region, constitutes now 30% of U.S. gas supply, up from 3% in the prior decade. It is projected to reach 35% by 2020. And we are seeing the largest gas producer in the United States is Texas today. However, when we couple the development in the Marcellus and Utica shale regions with Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, we are the largest producer in the U.S. on a regional basis that exceeds that Texas gas production. Worldwide, U.S. now is #1 in gas production, followed by Russia #2, Canada 3, and Qatar 4. If our region, led by Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, were its own country, we would be #3 in the world in terms of gas production. We're here today to present research findings and the focused activity led within our own state of Ohio, bringing to bear the world-class assets that have evolved in this past decade, integrating shale with natural gas liquids, the resources of the Ohio River, fresh water access managed on a sustainable basis, the manufacturing history and presence coupled with the rail network, and the access to 50% of U.S. markets that exists a day away from our Ohio base. We're supported by a rich history of contractor and workforce development, colleges and universities led by this particular grant, fostered by Ohio University over the past 3 years, as well as accessibility to workforce and other resources necessary to do this job. We're pleased and privileged to have our first speaker, Dana Saucier, Jr., as our keynote. And Dana is Managing Director of Shale Energy and Petrochemicals with JobsOhio. He's going to frame and review the current state of the industry and focus on prospects for future development, investment, and research in the shale arena in our state and in the region. We will then be followed by a presentation by Dr. Daniel Carney. Dan is professor of the OU Department of Economics and the leader of the Ohio University Research and update on the shale development in our communities within the state. An update from a landmark survey conducted by OU in 2013, and I think you will find interesting updates and trends in Dr. Carney's presentation shared with us today. Our third speaker will be Dr. Gilbert Michaud. Gilbert is adjunct assistant professor and cluster research specialist at the OU Voinovich School. Economic development impacts and jobs forecasts using in-plan modeling will be used by Gilbert in his presentation to show the oil and gas economic contributions to Ohio today. And our final wrap-up speaker will be Jonathan Norris. Jonathan is a research scholar at the Voinovich School and an MSES candidate at the Voinovich School as well. He will share the results of his research on workforce, infrastructure development, based also and supplemented with also local community leadership interviews and trends and policy options looking ahead there. And with that brief introduction, I'm pleased to turn the floor over to Dana Saucier. Dana, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Scott, for that introduction. And I also want to thank the University, Ohio University, for their leadership in assembling this event and discussing these important issues with a distinguished panel. And also thank you for including JobsOhio in this. I have probably too many slides. I'll try to get through them very quickly, but wanted to provide a perspective on the industry as we see it. And so let's get started. I thought that just a brief intro for those who do not know who JobsOhio is, thought maybe a couple lead-in slides would help sort of frame it up. When so JobsOhio was created by Governor Kasich, and in his first term, it was actually his first move as governor was to create JobsOhio, and the reason being is back in January 2011, Ohio had really slipped from an economic growth and development perspective. We were ranked number 47th in economic growth. We were second highest in job losses, and the economic outlook was near the bottom. And you know, companies that were quite frankly looking at Ohio came and weren't always necessarily given the response that they needed. As you know, as we all know, business moves quite at a brisk pace. The other thing was, for the companies that were based here, already here, the CEO engagement was quite low. They didn't see themselves as part of the selling the Ohio brand, if you will, and coordination around the state was not quite as well-oiled machine as it could have been. And the governor felt like just making incremental improvements was not enough. So it took a bold move to basically privatize the economic development function. So JobsOhio, there's three things that make us, I think, unique versus other economic development engines around the country. Is one, that it is private. It's a private, not-for-profit. And the reason that that's important is when companies are coming to or looking at Ohio and are in some cases sharing some very strategic moves on their part, want to know that they can share it in a way that will be kept private. And they don't want it to sort of show up in the public domain. And these are decisions that can move stock prices and are very strategically sensitive for them. And so they wanted to be able to engage in a private way. The second is very predictable funding. Many states around the country approve economic development budgets in kind of 3 to 5 year windows, and then they never know what will happen after that. JobsOhio is a very stable 25-year funding stream that's significant to make a difference. And then the third leg of the stool, if you will, is sector focused. And so what we did was we looked at what are the most meaningful sectors from if you look around the various industries in Ohio, what are some of the sectors that are most meaningful and could represent, kind of the future of Ohio? And I'll show you what those are here on the next slide. But the key there was that not only do we have sector focus, but we actually went out to those sectors and recruited a leader that on average has about 20 years experience in that sector. And the idea there would be take somebody that's walked a day in those shoes of that sector and would be much more able to align with the companies that are interested in doing things in Ohio and maybe see it from their perspective. We need to go to the next slide. So in the upper left are the 9 tradable sectors that we focus on. It is not to suggest we don't work on other projects, but those are the ones that we focus mostly on. I manage the Shale Energy and Petrochemical as well as the food and food processing and agriculture sectors. If you look in the box to the right, we also assembled 6 regional partners, and if you can see the green represents most of it's part of our APEG, Appalachian Partnership for Economic Growth, and that's a good chunk of the shale region, as well as the yellow, which is Team NEO, Northeast Ohio, does represent some of the northern shale areas. But what this allows us to do, and then obviously we have very local economic development, counties, towns, cities also have economic development. So what this allows us to do is have a top-down, bottom-up approach to economic development, and it makes quite a force to be reckoned with when we're trying to land deals. The box below that shows you just a brief on the tools in our toolbox, if you will. So JobsOhio is scouring the globe, not just domestically, for companies that might be a fit here in Ohio. We work very closely with our existing companies. Matter of fact, 6 out of the 10 jobs that we create are actually helping existing companies expand. So we're very loyal to our existing companies, but we also work internationally. And then we have a series of loans, grant programs that we put together. The other thing I think that makes us unique is we have a services agreement with the Ohio Department of Development, and we actually will bring customers in, and we will assess their needs, and then we will combine all of these types of programs into a combined offer for the company, and some of them are still approved under the state umbrella, but we will make recommendations and then they will, weigh in. But the advantage to the customer is that they're not having to work with multiple groups around the state. We can be kind of a one-stop shop, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. So how have we done? This just gives you a brief snapshot. About 104,000 new job commitments, new annual payroll, $4.64 billion, and then about $27 billion of invested capital. And as you can see, we work on about 250 to 350 projects a year, so quite a brisk pace. So we've new projects won is just under 1,500 over the term. The one thing I would call out here, though, is that we're only counting full-time jobs. We are not counting any second-tier jobs that would come as a result of the company locating here. And then we're also not counting any construction jobs. And as you know, particularly in the shale energy and petchem space, construction jobs can be, very significant, but we're not counting those as part of this slide. Next page, please. So this page depicts, we looked at this quite closely. The way to look at this slide is we're surveying, these are how we are ranked by publications that query CEOs, or from the perspective of the decision maker that we're trying to court. And so while we might think we're doing well, what's most impactful is how do the folks that we're trying to court to come here or expand here in Ohio think we're doing. And as you can see, we still have some work to do, but we've made, I think, tremendous progress. And that really, a lot of thanks comes to a team effort of not only the efforts of JobsOhio, but our regional partners and all of the local economic development organizations. I feel like we've, really made quite a substantial improvement to where things were back in 2011. Next slide, please. So now to sort of go into the shale energy and petchem space, This is a slide that every time I look at, having done this for 25 years, is quite astonishing. And so the way to look at this is the blue is the growth in shale in all of the rest of the United States, and then the green is kind of depicts the regional shale play with Utica and Marcellus. And what's astonishing, and there's some interesting takeaways here, is that over 85% of the growth in shale since 2011 has really occurred in our region. And as Michael mentioned earlier, this is in a lot of ways a resurgence of something that started here back during the Rockefeller years. And so it's just quite astonishing on how our region has led the country in growth. And what's interesting when we're meeting with companies all over the world, they're largely aware of the shale phenomenon going on in the overall U.S., but what they don't always appreciate is how the Ohio Valley area is really leading that. And so it's quite eye-opening and really sets us apart. The other thing that I'm most impressed with here is that we've been able to do this in a very safe and environmentally friendly way. And so, quite proud of that. And the second to the last bullet, where we've drilled less than 10% of the available acreage, as prices downturned here recently, and the rig count went down, folks were saying, oh, that was nice while it lasted. Well, I think our best days, as amazing as this resource has been, our best days are really in front of us. And this has been an impactful slide for folks that aren't really familiar with how we set ourselves apart. The next slide, please. And this one I kind of call the so what slide. Okay, well, we have a lot of resource. What does that mean to me as a business owner? Well, the way to look at this is just to kind of compare not only how we compare in the U.S., but against other big areas. So the yellow line is Japanese LNG import prices. The lighter blue line below that is the European Union gas, overall gas price. And then the darker blue below that is Henry Hub. And then finally, the red is our regional gas price. And, if you look back to 2008 timeframe, from an energy perspective, we didn't necessarily have a differentiated story to tell, but you can see how quickly that all changed. And then what's, from a petchem perspective, as a lot of the petrochemical cracking and things like that has always been done in the Gulf of Mexico. And, sometime around, 2014, we started to really diverge, where we're now significantly lower than the Gulf. And if you look, this goes out to 2021, I've seen numbers out to 2035 that show that our region stays below Henry Hub. And you'll see later in some slides that where really the market for a lot of these petrochemicals are in this region. So the fact that we have abundant feedstocks, low price, and we're really the center of the market really is a tremendous opportunity for us to take advantage of. And you can see the Wall Street Journal quote there that it's not just been from a petchem perspective, it's really been across a lot of industries that are dependent on a lot of energy to stay competitive. It really makes sense for them to look at our area. Next slide, please. So if you could kind of go back in time to 2011, this is specific to shale. We've had a lot of oil and gas, as Michael mentioned earlier. In the past, you've probably driven through the Ohio countryside and seen the small pump jacks. Those have been there a long, long time. What I'm talking about in this slide is really specific to the Utica Marcellus shale play. This is so the way to look at this is at the top, represents the upstream extractors, the oil and gas producers. And then as that blue arrow on the left, as you travel down, I think of that as traveling down the supply chain. And so you've got gas pipelines to move it to where it needs to go. You've got liquids pipelines. Then you have fractionation and processing. And basically the green boxes represent back in 2011 opportunities to fill in the supply chain. And as you can see at the bottom, we've always had a very significant and impressive legacy of chemicals. And you can see, and by no means this is exhaustive, these are just representative. If you can kind of lock this in your memory, the next slide will show you what it looks like today. If you could switch. And just astonishing, and keep in mind this is in really the last 5 or 6 years, the massive investment that's taken place and transformation in this supply chain, and we believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 billion of U.S. invested capital, and tremendous amount of job impacts and contribution to Ohio. And while some of those boxes that were green are now white, we're still very much focused to continue to expand. But here's where we've invested our time and kind of how we've tried to assist the industry to build itself out. The green are areas where we still see incremental opportunities, and so that's there's still a tremendous amount of work to be done. And as you all know, these are tremendously large infrastructure projects, so they take a long time, and we can talk about the ethane cracker as an example of that. But just an amazing story in really a 5 or 6 year period. It's almost hard to get your head around. Next slide, please. So brief slide, what I wanted to show, and for folks that aren't as familiar with the chemistry side of it, what really is, I think, impressive about this slide is really how much energy touches our everyday lives. And as we look, and this is how I think about my strategy and how we break this thing down and affect our strategy, is that we start with the raw material, and then we follow the chemistry chain all the way to, and you can see this really impacts everything from construction to biosector to pharmaceuticals, transportation, and so forth. And so as we look at how to create jobs, we're really looking at this flow and saying, okay, where don't we have capacity, or where there's an opportunity to fill in something that might be getting imported from either another state or another country. The other thing that I would mention, and given that this is sort of a overall jobs agenda here, is that while I'm very thankful for the raw material that we've been blessed with, and the fact that we've been able to get it out of the ground and extract it and process it, really, I think, and all of the associated jobs, associated with that, and I think Michael and Scott mentioned it earlier, is that we are very focused on adding value to that commodity. And so where the job opportunities blossom is as you follow it down this chain to all the way down to its final form. And we believe that, so while we're glad, what we want to do is capture, all the value add business, so that because if we don't, this commodity will find other markets, and other states or parts of the country will benefit from this amazing resource. And so we're working really diligent to not to say trap it here, but to give it as many reasons for it to be converted here in the marketplace. Next slide, please. So, and I'll just in brief form. So here, if you break it down, by the green boxes that we mentioned or showed in the earlier slide, the upstream extraction, we're working with the industry, making sure that we take as many of the hurdles out of their way so that they can continue to drive cost out of the exploration and production side. The midstream business, which takes all of the raw oil and gas and breaks it into its key components. There's opportunities for further expansion with those, and there's still tremendous resources and investment going there. The next one downstream power generation, for all kinds of reasons, we're retiring a fair amount of coal generation in the state and in the region. There's an opportunity now to replace that with highly efficient clean natural gas-fired power plants, and we have 4 that are currently under construction. One that's actually going to start full-scale production here in the next 60 days, and then there's an additional 4. These are each around $1 billion investment, so quite amazing. 700-800 construction jobs for about 3 or 4 years, so massive infrastructure, and then these plants will run reliably and clean and push out some of the cheapest electricity, in the region and in the country. Not to leave out the renewable side, but we've had a tremendous renewed interest in renewables. We've got 3 new utility-grade wind farms that I've worked on, and we have 4 additional opportunities that are currently under development. And then one thing that's not on here is some real focus on the solar side as well. Next slide, please. Then so downstream, again, following the chemical chain, there is an opportunity to land a world scale ethane cracker, which is very strategic to the region, because then what is now currently being imported by rail from the Gulf will have an opportunity to produce this locally, and we are already seeing other companies that are interested in also co-locating in the region to take advantage of the cracker production. And then, we're not only blessed with natural gas, we have significant volumes of propane, butane, ethane, condensate, and other hydrocarbons that all then could be also used for process or feedstocks for other processes. So we're focused on that. And then really, I think the prize, at least in the chemical side, is really continuing to build on our chemicals, adhesives, coatings, polymers, and plastics, which we've always, like I said, we're a big market for, and I have some slides to show that. So we're very focused with those companies that were listed in the bottom left of the continuum. Next slide is just to show how correlated chemical industry investments are to shale gas growth. You can see this is a national slide, but you can see how correlated it is. Obviously, the feedstock is the game changer here, as well as we're a market for the output. Next slide. Bring this down one notch to Ohio. You can see plastics processing projects by state, and as you can see, Ohio has an opportunity to grab a large percentage of the projects that are known. And then next slide, please. Just to show you the massive presence that industry has in Ohio. If you pick up the region, which includes the surrounding states, there's somewhere around 17,000 that are involved in some way, shape, or form in the industry. Over 45% of the American plastics demand is within 500 miles. So look, if we have the feedstock and we have the ability to convert it, we have the plastics market. So we have really the opportunity to close the entire loop here locally, and obviously would benefit from the jobs that would come from that. And then last slide. So beyond what I just laid out, what are we focused on? Obviously, the supply chain in the chemicals, plastics. The other is pipeline infrastructure build out. There are still parts of Ohio that don't have access to this low cost shale gas. Matter of fact, some of it is still being brought up from the Gulf, natural gas coming up from the Gulf. That's what has been done for decades. We now need some additional infrastructure so that we can give those parts of the state the cost advantage that the eastern part of the state is seeing. Then we're telling the story internationally. There's still a lot of chemicals coming in from Europe and Asia. If they're importing that, maybe now's the opportunity to produce it here as well. Obviously, the jobs would benefit. We need better sites. When we have companies that want to come here, we want to have sites, good real estate to show them. So we're working very hard on site development. Then there's, you know, revitalization with some of the coal plants that have closed and things like that. Some of those are also our best brownfield sites for redevelopment. So we have spent a tremendous time trying to understand those sites. APAG, our regional partner, has done a bang-up job really along the Ohio River. They have one of the best Ohio River site strategies out there. If you go to their website, you can see that in there. We have other states that actually ask to how they put their information together. So we feel like we're leading that. Then revitalizing, we've put some funds around revitalizing sites. Think of the old Clean Ohio. We've kind of picked that ball up and we're running with that to bring some of these brownfields back into new purposes. And then we work very hard. You can imagine these projects are extremely large infrastructure, and it's really important that we have tight relationships across the government here. And we often hear from industry that we're one of the best places that they've ever worked with to develop projects. Our EPA and ODNR and ODOT and on are very friendly and very business. You know, obviously they have a job to do, but they're very user friendly and business friendly, and have been quite good partners with us in our initiative. And then really workforce. We launched our workforce initiative. We are working very closely with colleges and universities and tech schools across the state. We're not there to reinvent what they're doing. What we're trying to do, though, is be better partners to some of the companies that are coming here and have workforce concerns. Some of them are foreign-based and just don't know how to sort of go about hiring, you know, highly skilled labor. So we're working very closely across the state and in the regions to close that gap and so forth. And then last thing I'll say is we're looking, as Wayne Gretzky said, don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where it's headed. And we see the industry changing. Obviously, the ethane cracker uses for carbon fiber, lightweighting materials, advanced materials, and then grid modernization as some areas that are maybe a little longer term, but these are areas that we see huge job implications positively, and so we're very focused on that. So with that, I apologize. I think I went a few minutes over, but I'll stop there.
Dana, thank you for that great and comprehensive review, and particularly that wrap up on the downstream focus that JobsOhio is leading currently. Our next speaker then is Dr. Daniel Carney. Dan, the floor is now yours.
Hello, my name is Dan Carney. As Mike said, I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Economics here at Ohio University. This is transitioning to a set of 3 presentations with myself and then Gilbert and then Jonathan that were originally done at the Ohio Shale Symposium at the end of April. So I will go first and then we'll continue to the next speakers. So I am going to present information about the Ohio Shale Development Community Impact Survey. This is a summary of the findings. So on the screen now we have a list of the team that worked on the survey. So I'm going to be presenting, but there is a large list of folks helping on this project, including some of the speakers you'll hear later, but also Daniel Klopfer, Alyssa, who organized the webinar, Mike. Also, thank you to folks at the Voinovich School, including Holly and Lindsay, for helping with the implementation and graphics for the output. Next. Okay, so the background is that in 2013, the Voinovich School and CE3 completed the initial version of this Ohio Shale Survey. As part of the Innovation Strategy Grant that Scott mentioned, this version, this 2016 version, is some sense of a follow-up on the 2013 version, but it also represents a shift in focus. The earlier survey had a much more narrow, or it asked a variety of questions, but it had a particular interest in housing. The topics of interest now are a little more broad, including general socioeconomic impacts, economic growth and tax revenue, and employment and workforce development. So we can see themes that are working back with our earlier presentation. Next, please. One important feature of this version of the survey relative to the first version is that it's going to allow us to decompose the effects of shale development by sector. So I'm going to put sector here in quotes. We have developed a framework kind of these economic sectors, which are a little different than the technical oil and gas subsectors that Dana talked about. So what we developed for the survey was a primary, secondary, indirect distinction. Primary would be something like all extraction production processes of shale gas and oil. Secondary would be all shale activities beyond that primary extraction and production process. And indirect, actually a very important piece, is all the other economic activity that's caused by shale development. So you can imagine a bunch of workers come to the region and there's demand for other goods and services like restaurants, hotels, entertainment, that kind of thing. So we developed these three sectors and we asked the survey, and the survey allowed us to break down these changes, not just did shale have an impact, but is it caused by primary, secondary, or indirect movers. Next, please. So quick slide about the sampling. So we sent out a mail survey. Who did we send out the mail survey to? 520 local public officials. And we sent 78 to county commissioners, 78 to county auditors, sheriffs, or health commissioners. We sent 234 surveys to trustees and 130 surveys to mayors or municipal administrators. Who are these folks? Well, we selected 26 counties with significant shale activity. And these counties were selected by looking at their number of production and injection wells using ODNR data, and then the number of primary and secondary oil and gas jobs using data from the Department of Jobs and Family Services. So we looked at the county level data for those two criteria, and we created cutoffs. There were 26 counties that had significant activity according to those definitions. And then from the 26 counties, we sent 3 surveys, 3 times 26 is 78 surveys to the commissioners, 1 to each of the other county level officials. We sent surveys to 9 different trustees in 3 different townships. So 3 surveys in 3 different townships, and then 5 municipal administrators in each of those 26 counties. So 5 times 26 is 130. The overall response rate was 24.2%. That's in lines with other mail surveys. That's 126 surveys that we received back. The response rate was both balanced by type of official and by county. So I ran some statistics to see, was the proportion of surveys sent out to county commissioners equal to the proportion of surveys received from county commissioners? And indeed, that's the case. And it's relatively true across all of the categories mentioned above. It's also statistically balanced across the 26 counties. So there was a good response sampling overall. Next, please. Oh, one more. Yeah. Overview of results. So I'm going to start with qualitative overview. So the response indicated that shale development has led to general economic growth and wealth creation. Not surprising. Growth in tax revenue and fees at the local level, but mostly from indirect sources. So again, the indirect sources would be activities like restaurants, hotels, etc. But this is an interesting result. The third is that there is growth in employment, but these local officials tended to report it as being temporary employment, so employment that was not that did not have an undefined end date. And economic growth is continuing, but has been slow in recent years, and that is well correlated with a relative slump in gas prices recently. Next, please. So this is a quick summary table with some numbers in it. So of the 3 main categories we talked about at the beginning, socioeconomic impacts, economic growth and tax revenue, and employment workforce development, we asked a series of questions under each of those topics. And these are the three specific questions that had the most respondents indicating an increase. For instance, on the socioeconomic impact line, we've had a question about or property values and land prices, the cost of land increasing in your area, and 45.6% of the respondents reported an increase. And then the last column indicates where this increase is coming from, and about equal proportion said of those that responded with an increase, approximately equal proportion said those were coming from the primary and secondary economic sectors. If you jump down to the second block, economic growth and tax revenue, you see the local tax revenue and fee line. That's the sixth line down. 43.7% of respondents reported an increase, but most of those respondents said that that increase was coming from, again, that indirect economic activity. And then we have workforce and employment information below that. Next slide, please. This is a slide giving a little more detail for the land value. This is an important wealth driver. There are these two graphs next to each other, two figures next to each other. They're related. I'm going to tell you how they're related. The first one on the left gives the number of response. For example, let's look at the first column in the left figure. It's horizontal shale well drilling. So about 80 respondents said that there was some horizontal well drilling in their area, however they defined it. About 35 of those folks said that there was an increase in the past year. So that's how you read the left picture. Again, these different subcategories. Importantly, then shifting to the right, for that same first column, you see horizontal shale well drilling. 76.1% of those that indicated an increase in horizontal well drilling indicated an increase in property value. So there's a strong correlation between an increase in activity and an increase in property value along many different dimensions. And so this indicates that there's a strong correlation between, again, increase in activity and increase in value. Again, this is not unexpected, but it is a good confirmation of our intuition. Another important piece is that folks that found little extra or little to no primary and secondary activity in their areas saw very little property value increases. Property values can increase for a variety of reasons, but again, not from shale development. Next slide. One other thing we were able to do is look at a comparison between the 2013 and 2016 surveys. Not all questions were identical between the surveys, but we did find one important piece that I would like to report here. We found that a greater percentage of respondents in 2016 reported increased tax revenue related to shale compared to 2013. Again, this is consistent with our contemporaneous finding that tax revenue is being generated by these indirect activities. And so if you think that there's a lag between when primary and secondary activity starts and when these indirect activities are developed locally, then you might expect this lag in local tax and fee revenue. And so that's indeed what we find. Next slide, please. So a quick caveat before we conclude. This is a survey that is, while the mail survey sent out is random with respect to which exact individuals within the categories received them, for example, which municipal towns were selected, the response rate may not be random. And so we did find a correlation between the third-party data on well and shale activity and response rate. So we know there's a slightly higher response rate in places where there's more activity. Again, this is not surprising, but it's a caveat to consider when looking at the results. And finally, just the general conclusion, shale development has led to many positive outcomes, including economic growth, wealth creation. There are still some concerns to be addressed, particularly with the nature of the type of employment created, being it a temporary or permanent nature. So with that, I'll stop and we'll move on to our next presenter.
Thank you, Dan. And our audience is reminded to please use the question feature on your screen to pose questions that will be reviewed in our discussion that will follow. I'm pleased now to introduce Gilbert Michaud, who will be our next speaker. focusing on the concrete economic contributions that we are seeing from the Ohio shale industry today. Gilbert, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. As Mike noted, my name is Gilbert Michaud. I am an adjunct assistant professor and researcher here at the Ohio University Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs. Most of my research is focused on economic development and energy matters. And specifically for this project, I was tasked with understanding the economic impact of the shale industry to Ohio. And thus the formal title here is Ohio Shale Industry's Economic Contribution. Next slide, please. So as an introduction to this research, again, it focuses on Ohio's shale oil and gas industry. As has been established already through the prior presentations, specifically in the eastern part of the state, we have the Marcellus and Utica shale plays, and advancements in hydraulic fracturing or fracking techniques over the last 5 to 10 years have really enhanced this industry in the eastern part of our state. We understand that there's been a resource extraction boom, but at the same time, there may be an impending economic and environmental bust. And thus our team here at the university has been tasked with researching this and ways to lessen the impacts of such a bust. We also anecdotally sort of know that value enhancement is done elsewhere when we move down that chain. And again, we also know that the shale industry is in fact a key contributor to the state's economy, but to what extent? So the purpose of my research within this scope is to update prior studies and figures of this economic contribution with 2015 data, which is the most recent data set that we have available. Next slide, please. So very briefly here, this map to the right of the slide depicts, specifically the Utica and Marcellus shale plays in the eastern part of the state. Ohio is currently 4th in the total number of wells drilled, produces enough natural gas to heat over 1 million homes and businesses in Ohio, so it is a very sizable industry. And as we know, it's processed and refined to thousands of everyday products, such as medical products, plastics, fuel, et cetera. So it is a very important industry to the state as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of a formal methodology for my aspect of this research, what I first did was looked at the scope of firms, the different types of companies that exist within the shale industry in Ohio. And what I did is I organized those shale industry firms into 6 distinct sectors using their NAICS and subsequent implant codes. NAICS codes are essentially North American Industry Classification System codes. Every firm in the United States has some sort of NAICS code, which describes the nature of their business. I'll explain a little bit more about what this means on the next slide. But specifically, I utilized implant version 3.1, which is an economic impact modeling software that we utilize at the university, and conducted what is termed as a multi-industry economic contribution analysis. There are a few different customizations that one has to make in order to do this, essentially to alleviate double counting. But what's important here is that I ran models for the entire state of Ohio, so all 88 counties, and then subsequently a 26 county shale heavy region, as well as by each of the 6 sectors and by county within that 26 county region specifically. Next slide, please. So here on this slide, we see the core shale-related industries. Again, these are the 6 that were modeled. Specifically, you can see on the left-hand side the 6-digit NAICS code and the description of that industry and how that aligns with the implant code specifically. So, for instance, we have, in the second row here, NAICS code 211112, natural gas liquid extraction, which subsequently corresponds with implant number 21, extraction of natural gas liquids. And so the point here is that they align rather nicely, which was great for the purposes of my modeling. Next slide, please. So to finally get to some of the results In the first table at the top here, we can see specifically the contribution summary of the shale industry. Again, this is with 2015 data. The different types of impacts here, not to confuse folks listening from Dan Carney's research, which had primary, secondary, and indirect. Here we have direct, indirect, and induced, which, direct is, if we think about employment, for instance, these are the people that are directly employed within those 6 specific sectors. Indirect impact are essentially supply chain impacts in terms of the vendors that are utilized from those core industries. And then induced is really the extra spending of disposable income at restaurants and grocery stores and things of that nature. And then the 4 variables working from left to right: employment, labor income, value added, and output. We can see the respective metrics for each of those impact type categories throughout this matrix. Output essentially corresponds with the economic impact or the economic contribution, if you will, through this methodology. But anyway, so what we see here is that, over 85,000 individuals are directly employed within the 6, core shale-related industries within 2015 throughout the entire state. A total effect here of almost 150,000 folks. And then, we have a multiplier effect of 1.72. What this means specifically is that for every job created in Ohio's shale industry, an additional 0.72 jobs are created in the state through that multiplier effect in the indirect and induced impacts, right? And then another, important metric, if we work our way to the right, is the output or economic impact. Contributes over $13 billion directly to the state's economy, just looking at the 6 key sectors. But when we include all those other ancillary impacts, we're talking about an industry that is $22.338 billion contributor to the state, which is very sizable. And then under this table, we have the tax impacts of the shale industry. For the purposes of time, I won't walk through all of the details of this, but here we're describing the total state and local tax and total federal tax contributions, both from employees and all the way through to the corporations or firms or companies themselves. Next slide, please. One other way to look at these data is to look at the economic contribution by specific sector. So if you recall the 6 sectors on 2 slides ago, we have, this pie graph depicts each of those and what percentage of the pie they are for this total economic contribution metric of 22.34 billion. So what we see emerge is that pipeline construction is far and away the largest economic contributor, looking at this on a sector by sector level, contributing almost $14 billion to the state's economy, taken as a whole, followed quite distantly by extraction of natural gas and crude petroleum, extraction of natural gas liquids, and on down the line through pipeline transportation, which contributes the least at just under $1 billion. Next slide, please. Another way to look at this is if we look at employment by sector. Again, this is through the total effect figures. We have pipeline construction. No surprise that it sort of aligns with the prior pie chart, which had it as the largest economic contributor. We see that same trend here, employing over 95,000 individuals. Again, extraction of natural gas and crude petroleum emerges as the second largest employer. But when we look at the final 4, things do get swapped around a little bit. Specifically, extraction of natural gas liquids, which was in 3rd place, if you will, on the prior slide, now becomes the lowest in terms of the employment measurement, which is interesting. Next slide, please. One other thing that IMPLAN allows me to do as a researcher is, look at the wage rankings by each of these sectors. And this is simply taken as a calculation of labor income and that figure divided out by the employment figure. And what we see here is pipeline transportation, despite the fact that it was the lowest economic contributor and second to lowest sector in terms of employment is actually pays the highest wages looking across the sectors. Pipeline construction, which again was the largest economic contributor and had the most number of employees, is sort of middle of the road here at an average annual salary of just shy of $51,000 per year. Average among all 6 sectors is just north of $56,000 per year. Next slide, please. And one last data point of interest is Implant allows me to assess sort of the top industries that are affected by employment. It actually gives you the top 10, 5 of which were included within the core industries that were modeled. So remove those, and here this table depicts in order of employment some of the other top industries in sort of that multiplier effect that are affected, right? So wholesale trade, as a direct result of shale activity, employs over 3,000 people within the state of Ohio. Limited service, fast food and full service restaurants are included here as well. Hospitals and real estate, there are large impacts there due to shale activity in Ohio, both employing around 2,000 people within the state, respectively. And then we also see the figures here for labor income, value added, and then the economic impacts or output for those specific sectors, again, as a specific result of shale activity in the state. Next slide, please. And then finally, as noted in my methodology slide, I looked at the county by county economic contributions. Again, this was just specific to the 26 county shale heavy, if you will, region in the eastern part of the state. This table notes the top 5 counties by economic impact per capita. The total economic impact is listed there in the second column, but economic impact per capita is a more apples to apples comparison, which divides out by population to assess that. So we have Noble, Monroe, Belmont, Guernsey, and then Washington as your top 5 shale county industry clusters, if you will. We see also number of employees in that third column, average shale industry wage. So for instance, Belmont County, which we sort of anecdotally know is a key, oil and gas, a key shale county within the eastern part of the state. We can see contributes over $1 billion to the state, employs almost 4,000 individuals, has the highest, among these 5 counties at least, shale industry wage. And so, this is, further justification. There's been a lot of discussion about a cracker plant coming to Belmont County. And this is just another way to look at the data and assess how the counties are doing compared to one another specifically. Next slide, please. So to wrap things up here, all of this research has showed that there are strong economic impact metrics for shale activity in the state of Ohio. Again, pipeline construction employs the most individuals, contributes the most to the state's economy. Pipeline transportation, on the other hand, pays the highest wages. But again, really our team here has been tasked with understanding how to keep some of the impacts of the shale industry within the Southeast Ohio region. There are a number of different strategies in terms of education, workforce training, maybe supply chain assistance. What are the things that we can do as a university and working with our regional partners and folks in general to enhance economic development within the region and specifically to retain wealth within the region? So, these are some of the questions that we're trying to dig through right now. Next slide, please. So that's it for me. We're going to turn it over to Jonathan, and thank you for listening. Okay, thank
Jonathan,
you, Gilbert.
You're our last speaker before our discussion, and take it from here.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Norris, and I've been working on the Shale Innovation Project for the last year. Since then, I've conducted 2 observational studies, one on building resilience in workforce development as it relates to shale, and another on the impacts of shale activity on public infrastructure in Ohio's most shale active counties. To start, we're going to discuss the workforce development study. Next slide, please. The crux of the research conducted by the Shale Innovation Project, and the impetus for this study in particular is the volatility of oil and gas pricing and the boom and bust scenarios that typically accompany it. From about 2012 to 2014, Ohio saw a sharp increase in oil and gas drilling and production. In about the same time frame, 2011 to 2015, Ohio added 4,711 net direct jobs in oil and gas and 10,495 net indirect jobs in oil and gas. Also in that time frame, withdrawals from shale formations took the lead in the United States overall natural gas withdrawals. These early trends signaled job opportunities for the region's workforce. As drillers in search of cheap and abundant natural gas flocked to the Marcellus and Utica in eastern Ohio, however, supply soon exceeded demand, and due in part to market forces, the price of oil and gas dropped sharply in 2014. Drillers understandably capped their wells and upstream activities slowed. This led us to ask, what did the downturn mean for Ohio's oil and gas workers? What opportunities exist for the region's workforce when the industry experiences a downturn? And most relevantly to this study, can transferable skill building play a role in preparing the workforce for industry downturns? Next slide, please. To explore these questions, I reviewed the programs and offerings of a few workforce development actors in the state: the Ohio Oil and Gas Energy Education Program, Ohio's colleges, universities, and technical education centers, Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, ShaleNet, and examples of on-the-job training. By examining the programs with shale boom and bust cycles in mind, we identified 4 policy options that may contribute to a workforce that is more resilient in the face of future potential downturns. First, skill building that meets and transcends the oil and gas industry can provide the region's workforce with skills that enable them to crosswalk to other sectors if necessary. This relates to the second point as well: transferable skill building. A recent model for doing this is ShaleNet's stackable credential model, a regional workforce development program that emphasizes transferable skill building and continual learning. Next, establish continuous public-private relationships between the industry and the public sector. A 2014 report by the RAND Corporation on workforce development in the Marcellus and Utica recommended developing sustained partnerships between industry leaders and training providers to ensure that training programs meet the needs of the region's emerging unconventional energy sector. Such a relationship can clarify the needs that each sector has related to workforce development. The Ohio Oil and Gas Energy Education Program may serve as a local model for this due to their strong relationships with schools and industry in the region. Finally, local economic diversification is key. Simply put, a resilient local workforce with broad and relevant skill sets cannot crosswalk to other sectors if they don't exist. It's likely that the previous enhancements to workforce development may not be as effective in retaining local talent if a diverse array of job prospects exists locally. Investing in economic diversification locally can provide cushion for shale boom and bust cycles and serve to retain local talent through diverse job opportunities. Next slide, please. The next study that we did was a qualitative study on the impacts of shale activity to public infrastructure in the Appalachian region. This study also covered the management strategies that public officials used for these impacts. The study is grounded in interviews with 7 public officials in Ohio's top oil and gas producing counties. We spoke to county engineers, a county commissioner, an emergency management official, a port authority director, a community improvement director, and an economic development office director. Additionally, we conducted a literature review on the natural resource boom and bust literature, shale financing, and other examples of public infrastructure impacts in the state of New York. Next slide, please. As shale activity ramped up in eastern Ohio, counties and communities that were not used to such high levels of oil and gas activity were tasked with managing both new economic activity and impacts to their roadways, water and waste systems, emergency service systems, housing, schools, and public office staffing. As you can see in this graphic, the interviewees reported an array of impacts to their public infrastructure. Road damage and maintenance increased. An influx of transient or temporary workers led to an increased strain on schools. Since public schools are funded in part by property taxes, transient workers who enrolled their children without buying property are estimated to have raised schooling costs. Housing prices and rent raised due to increased demand from workers and new businesses entering the region. As a result, homelessness raised as well. The strain on emergency services increased, with one director citing a 20-fold increase in hazardous substance filings in their operating area. The strain on public office staffing increased. but the impending downturn in 2014 prevented many offices from hiring new staff. There were also some positive impacts. Increased shale activity brought increases in tax revenue and enabled infrastructure expansion that would likely not have happened otherwise. Ultimately, the most challenging part of managing these new and unfamiliar impacts was the boom and bust nature of oil and gas activity in the region. As a downturn was expected, it was unwise to invest in new housing stock or hire new staff. And these impacts, through our literature review, seem to happen consistently regardless of what place they're in. Next slide, please. To manage these impacts, interviewees discussed 4 major strategies. First, many of the interviewees anticipated the bust. Instead of hiring new staff, most developed more scalable, efficient work processes and reshuffled responsibility. One county engineer staff member we spoke to highlighted the practice of breaking the road use maintenance agreement that was popular among all counties into 3 separate RUMAs depending on the type of operation the road would relate to. Additionally, the county commissioner that we spoke to suggested that public officials not rely on shale-related tax revenue for public budgets. For fear of overextending their resources, this commissioner stated that their county decided to save the windfall instead. Interviewees also highlighted how helpful it was to partner with the industry early and often. Many held pre-planning meetings with the towns in the county as well as private industry before activity ramped up. They mentioned that consulting with the industry helped them to understand how best to work together to manage these impacts. Next slide, please. Next, the interviewee suggested the establishment of a fund to save shale-related tax and royalty revenue for future use. One mechanism for doing this is a permanent trust fund, in which tax revenue may be saved and then later invested in capital markets. The funds may be used later for future needs, whether that's economic diversification efforts, carbon reduction efforts, workforce development, etc. While no permanent trust fund of this sort currently exists in the region, the interviewees did use some other methods of saving. Some carried a larger than usual general fund, and others invested the revenue into non-recurring infrastructure needs like waterline extensions and new police cruisers. Finally, the last management strategy reported is forming regional alliances. As shale activity ramped up in the region, some interviewees cited the County Engineer Association of Ohio as a helpful organization from which they learned lessons like how to use the road use maintenance agreement in the region. From the interviewees, it seems that alliances serve 2 purposes: to share best practices and to increase capacity during times of increased shale activity. One alliance that was in the final stages of development during the time of the interview is the Emergency Management Assistance Team. This was described as a regional emergency management alliance aimed at increasing capacity for the operational side of emergency response, as opposed to the front line of response. It was modeled after FEMA's model, IMAT, rather than EMAT. Overall, one interviewee summed up the impact of new shale activity to their county best by saying it was a paradigm change. This study and others that are similar may provide insights for other counties and communities impacted by shale activity in the future. If you'd like to learn more, you can find 2 separate white papers on both of these topics at www.ohio.edu/ce3/resources/whitepapers.cfm. That's it for me, Mike. Go ahead.
Jonathan, thank you. And thank you to all of our speakers for the very diversified and detailed perspectives that have been shared today. We have several interesting questions that have been launched. The first question, let's go back to Dana. And Dana, can you briefly share what is the status of the new cracker projects in the multi-state region beyond Shale's proposed facility, which is under development outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania?
Sure. I kind of anticipated that this might come up, so I actually put a couple slides that are on the screen now. Where things stand today is that the company that Mike mentioned is PTT Global Chemical, company based in Thailand, very large petrochemical producer. A little known fact is that they actually are 50% owner in Emery Oleochemical, which is in the Cincinnati area. So while a lot of folks think they're new to the United States, they're actually not, and they're actually not new to Ohio. They employ over 300 people there. basically, work continues. We have a team that's focused on this. They decided to do a dual feed approach with Fluor and Bechtel. We knew up front that would take longer to do that, because now you're having parallel engineering and design build firms that you need to work with, so that obviously increases the workload. Way back when we initially had a date of March of 17 as kind of their final investment decision, but that's modified to be the fourth quarter. They've been in complete communication with us, and we've interacted with even their board and investors and things like that. So it's been very inclusive relationship. We're not concerned by the delay. As you can imagine, these are $6 billion+ investments, massive infrastructure. These take quite some time. So the timeline may seem long, but it's actually quite consistent with cracker projects all over the world. We were working and facilitating with all their permits. Essentially, all the permits have been issued to build the facility, with the exception of the air permits. Those were held back because they have not finalized the cracker design yet. Once that does, then we would apply for the permits. You go to the next slide, please. So what we've done in the interim has been really in site preparedness. We have worked with both PTT and the landowners, and I'll show you some pictures of the site, but significant amount of JobsOhio funds have gone into getting the site ready. We've invested nearly $20 million. There was it was the site of the F.E. Berger coal power plant in Belmont County. So there was a significant facility that needed to come down that had been shut down several years prior. And so we've been working quite closely with Ohio EPA, and happy to announce that the retired coal plant site has actually been given a covenant not to sue. So it's essentially a shovel-ready site. It's been completely remediated and it's ready for repurposing. So a little bit, it's not something that JobsOhio had done, putting this type of investment behind a site, but we're very confident in the region and in the site. We think it's the best cracker site along the river, and so we're quite pleased where things stand. And if you go to the next slide, this shows you in the upper left the site. Again, it's about 550 acres. There's two sites. There's the land that the power plant sits on, and then there's the part to the south, which is actually a separate landowner. PTT would occupy both sites, and working quite closely with both owners. The power plant and fly ash removal is the expense that we took on. You can see on the left partial demolishing of the plant, and then the final back on July of last summer, the stack was taken down. And if you go to the next slide, it shows you a couple pictures of what it looks like today. So massive flat riverfront site that is now shovel ready, and when PTT makes their final decision, no additional work will be needed on the site where the power plant was to basically start to break ground. And so we're quite excited about where this stands today. Any follow-up questions to that?
The next question, let's focus briefly with Gilbert, and other speakers may want to comment on this question as well. We have several audience members interested in the bifurcation of jobs and jobs analysis between jobs that may be temporary and jobs that may be permanent. related to shale development in the state. Many of the primary jobs are often performed by temporary residents, while the secondary or indirect jobs are assumed by more permanent residents of the state. Any comment on that, as well as secondly, how is this to be interpreted in terms of continuing jobs and growth in these industry areas for the future of the state? Gilbert, you want to start that discussion?
Sure, Mike. Yeah, thank you. There are some limitations with the in-plane modeling software. It really is sort of a static model, and it's also a backward-looking model. So what it does is it utilizes industry sales as its key input from prior years as the key input to generate those outputs, right? And so what we see is that there's no way for me to differentiate specifically how construction versus O&M or operations and maintenance or sort of the more permanent jobs figures would look. The best way to do that would be some sort of forward-looking projection. If, for instance, I had data for an impending cracker plant or some other big type of project, and then could model either by expected employees to two different phases, or by expected sales or generation or things of that nature, to discern how the transient temporary type jobs would occur in relation to those that are more permanent. Sort of anecdotally, we know that a lot of folks are probably coming in from Texas and Oklahoma for jobs in terms of the construction of these types of plants. They're probably contracting out with firms in the Pittsburgh region, for instance. So there are some limitations to the data that I have been working with, and it is pretty difficult to discern that. But the figures that are displayed are comprehensive of both of those specifically. I believe Jonathan has something to add to the discussion as well.
Right. So a couple other points on this. So as part of the literature review for the workforce development study that we did in the fall, was a study by an organization called High Road Strategy. So they were looking at workforce development in the unconventional energy sector, not just in Ohio, but in the United States as a whole. And they identified a skill gap in states like Ohio, where oil and gas and shale development is relatively new. Also, from speaking with a few public officials in that study, anecdotally, drug test failures have come up as a barrier to local direct workforce opportunities. And then Gilbert touched on this as well. Anecdotally, companies from Texas and Oklahoma have already invested resources into training transient workers who move from state to state and work on these rigs. So they, in a sense, already kind of have those jobs covered. So those are three other points that play into this as well.
And this is Gilbert again. I will add as well in terms of how the job metrics are calculated. We're using the same definitions of the quarterly census of employment and wages through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so the job figures that you're seeing essentially, in essence, one job lasting 12 months equals two jobs lasting 6 months each, or three jobs lasting 4 months each. So we're really looking at both full-time and part-time jobs to answer that aspect of the question.
Well, and also I think I might add, Gilbert, that there's a lead lag factor in terms of data availability that is also a contributor to the analysis, at least 2 years lag in some instances in sourcing data.
Yes, correct.
Why don't we then switch to a question for Dan for a moment. Dan, there are other surveys, one commentator notes, that show a decrease of property values related to horizontal drilling. How does the recent updated OU survey measure up in validity metrics compared with some of these other surveys on property values?
So we know that the response rate for the survey and the balance of the response rate for the survey are comparable to other mail surveys. There are other types of survey methodologies. I think one caveat with the results that I mentioned at the end is that we know for this survey in particular that there was a higher response rate in places that had higher levels of activity. We also know that higher levels of activity are correlated with reported increases in property values. And so those two factors, are just a function of this type of survey methodology, and it's something to keep in mind when interpreting the results.
Okay, Dana, let's go back on your presentation. What will happen to regional gas prices once frac gas export pipelines like the Rover pipeline are in operation, taking the gas to higher price markets? One of your slides focused, I think particularly slide 7, on the different pricing on offtakes, in particular higher prices in Europe and Japan. Do you have any thoughts on that question, or have you seen any analysis on that issue looking ahead?
I know I don't have any specific pricing, but just directionally, a couple of comments. The play, Utica Marcellus play is so prolific and so much, if you look at the rig counts, has come down from its peak, but yet flowing gas has really not subsided, or if it has, it's been very little. What it shows is that there's just too much for the region to fully absorb, from a, combustion perspective. So it's sort of it's a balance, because on one hand, you like to keep your cost advantage, all to yourself. But on the other hand, there's so much gas being produced that, for the oil and gas drilling firms to have, to be able to be profitable and make money, and they've done a tremendous job driving their costs out of their business and trying to be as efficient. As a matter of fact, it's quite astonishing how efficient they've become in a very short period. You have to walk the balance of giving, them having good markets to continue to be profitable and be able to expand. But what we are so like Rover and Nexus and all these pipelines, proposed pipelines, Leach Express and others, what we are trying to do, particularly as the ones that go back into Ohio, is that we're doing everything we can to, as I call, create off ramps off the highway. It's be able to have new interconnects with not only large power plants and large industrials, but also with all of our gas utilities around the state. And so Nexus and Rover, for instance, there will be folks in western part of Ohio that would have access to shale gas, where right now they're bringing most of their gas up from the Gulf. Leach Express is actually going through a part of Ohio that doesn't even have natural gas infrastructure, so there could be opportunities for those areas and companies to also be able to tap in and be able to. So we think it'll tighten the pricing. We may not have quite an advantage, but I do see a lot of that is focused into the forward curves, and we still see that there will be some cost advantages, albeit I think it'll tighten some, but I think we will still maintain a cost advantage for the foreseeable future.
Let me go to the next question, Dan, related to the survey. Have you seen or aware of any survey work done on public health impacts related to shale development, which can have economic consequences as well? Is anyone studying or looking at those issues in Ohio that you're aware of? I know there's some effort undertaken that's been launched in Pennsylvania within the past year. Any update or reports on those issues with economic consequences in Ohio?
Thanks for the question, Mike. There is certainly a lot of work with regards to are there any public health impacts. That comes to mind is the distinction between are there impacts and are there perceived impacts. And the measuring actual impacts is hard, but measuring do people perceive that there might be an impact, that's a little bit easier. So there's a study out of Ohio State University that showed that shale development led to an increase in bottled water purchases in places where where residents are dependent on well water. And so this was a measure that these economists interpreted as there being a perceived potential negative health impact from shale development. Measuring are there actually ex post impacts. That's a little bit takes some more data, and there's still information coming in, but there is I think good economic evidence that people are at least have some level of concern about potential negative impacts.
Let me ask then a final, anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry, Mike, this is Jonathan Norris. Additionally, I think also it's important to add that there's some work being done in the Environmental Studies program at the Voinovich School on potential wastewater impacts to the environment as well. So I'm not sure of any publications that have come of that yet, but I believe that the work is ongoing.
And I would add to that, there's also work being done for the state of Ohio by the university on air impacts as well in the state. That has not been completed, but that is also an ongoing research assignment being led, particularly in the School of Engineering. Final brief question, Jonathan, before we move to the wrap up. We noted one of the audience participants that there were some large differences in shale industry wages in different counties. Shale workers make 3 times more in Belmont County than in Monroe County, for example. Why would that be the case? Do you have any insight to offer on that question as we wrap down?
Yeah, this is Gilbert, Mike. I'll attempt to tackle that. That's an interesting and pretty difficult question to answer. I haven't dug too deep into the differences between wage rankings by county and by sector and what that specifically means. My read on it is that, in Belmont, for instance, we sort of have this economies of scale situation where shale oil and gas is really the largest contributor to the state's to that county's economy, especially working your way through that multiplier effect. And so shale activity is really enhanced and really prevalent there. And so they're probably, paying a premium, paying a higher wage rate to accommodate the increased cost of living. They're bringing a lot of folks from other parts of the country, and just sort of this enhanced activity perhaps contributes to higher wages that must be paid, especially when compared to some of the other counties in the southeastern Ohio region that are specifically very rural in nature and that have, relatively low costs of living. Not sure if anyone else wants to chime in about that.
Well, that'll be the last part of the discussion for today. There are other questions that we couldn't get to from the audience, and we will seek to respond to those either in writing or by email with you in the future from our various discussants and panelists. I want to take this opportunity to thank our panel and the individual presentations that have been made today. They reflect a lot of thought and work and a lot of detailed analysis of the increased opportunity, challenges, and questions that will lie ahead in support of Ohio's shale policy and technology as a tool for economic development within the state. It's important that the comments today will be memorialized on the OU CE3 website. Presentations and detailed bios will be posted on each of our speakers as well. Our collective research continues in year 2 at Ohio University. We're going to be studying in a deeper fashion economic and funding challenges lying ahead for our communities, and helping them manage impacts of continued development within the state. We hope to schedule a policy briefing for legislators and their staffs in Columbus, perhaps by the end of this year, to share more fully some of the research and work that we are conducting. The other important issue that has come to light is the financial impacts and the critical nature of seeking funding for community impact in companies as well in the supply chain, particularly in the $10 to $50 million range. There's a lack of lending institutions with lending capacity in Appalachia. In that area, this is a growing area of interest by the Federal Reserve in Cleveland. And the complexity of the work and the challenges of scale will need to be explored with banks, cities, and towns and counties in greater detail to develop more effective tools to serve companies, our supply chain, as well as our communities for the future. Another area that will be examined is the opportunities for comparisons with what other states are doing with Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia on wealth management issues associated with energy and shale development. And finally, coping with some of the challenges noted in recognizing the need for regionalization to create scale and specific benefits that are shared by our communities in the state, as well as states in the multiple regions that are affected in the Utica play. The Shale Crescent USA is grounded in this principle. The multi-state governors MOU reached in 2016 also seeks to foster shared analysis and development of shale impacts and opportunities. Ultimately, Ohio is taking strong position and leadership in these sectors, and industry ultimately drives regionalism best, and that will be a story yet to unfold in the future ahead. Thank you to our audience, and thank you again to our speakers, and have a pleasant week and a good summer.